In this video, I chat with Danny Weinbaum, the creator of Eastshade. Danny put everything on the line to make his dream game. From working in the early mornings into late at night after his day job, Danny sacrificed the comforts of a normal life to make an indie game. If you stick around to the end of this video, you're gonna learn so much from Danny. And ultimately, you're gonna learn if this sacrifice was even worth it for Danny. And ultimately, how much Danny ended up making for this passion project.
I think I started with like my initial inkling on my path to games, I think was a program called Vue, which is a really niche foliage visualization program mostly for film. And I got pretty sucked in right away. I knew I wanted to be a 3D artist at that point. The only thing I didn't know is what industry I wanted to go into. I think Half-Life 2 was the game that made me feel like, oh my God, I want to make game environments. Like I want to make this sense of place. That's when I started really honing in on video games. I eventually went to a trade school called Future Poly, which is now closed. And it was kind of different from other schools because they weren't accredited. You weren't going to get a degree or anything. I kind of picked up early on that schooling wasn't going to be important. Like I knew that I just needed a banger portfolio. And this trade school, it was like a 3-month course, and it was like a Cambrian explosion of like learning at that time. And I was just right in the right time in my life. I had nothing else going on. It was like do or die. I kind of had like, I guess, low self-esteem about wanting to be an artist in my life and hoping that I'd be able to get a job. And I told myself, well, I'm going to get a job in the games industry or I'm going to die trying. Like this is what I'm going to do. There is no backup. And I just went super duper duper hard. I was working like 12 hours a day on my portfolio pieces during the course of this class, and ended up the teacher threw out the teacher, which actually was my mentor for a number of years. He threw out sort of a bone to the class. He said, we're looking for interns, and they put out an art test for the entire class, and basically everyone did it, but I ended up landing the internship, fortunately, and that was kind of my start. And then I guess the next like 3.5 years I worked in AAA. I learned some stuff, but mostly I just, did environment art stuff. I really liked working in AAA. I was treated really well. I know a lot of folks talk about, crunch and toxic work culture and things like that. My experience was fortunately really good. I started working on, I knew I always wanted to make my own game. I knew that the entire time I was working in AAA. I was actually learning to code in the wee hours during that entire time period. I sort of felt like, okay, I've got like art in the bag. I'm an industry level artist. And now I'm gonna learn how to code. I started working on what would become Eastshade, and I just was like so addicted, like more addicted than I've ever been on any, imagine like your most addictive moment on like an RPG, like World of Warcraft high, like in that moment when you can't wait to play. That's basically how I was about working on Eastshade. And I realized I couldn't stay up till 5 a.m. every night and try to go back into work every day. It was killing me.
And how old were you?
24, 23.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're like me and you always dreamt of making an indie game as a full-time job, I have a free webinar below that goes into exactly how to make 6 figures with just a demo. I was just like you for years. I thought I had to make a game in its entirety before getting a paycheck, but there's actually 3 ways to make 6 figures before even finishing your game. I've done this multiple times, so check it out below if you do want to go full-time indie. And thanks for watching. Dude, I feel like you and I were like, dude, this is a crazy thought. You and I were both waking up early, and we were both doing this at the same time. I mean, I was on the East Coast and you were on the West Coast.
Maybe we were even waking up at the same time. I was going to bed early. Like I was going to bed at like 4 or 5 a.m.
That feeling you're talking about, dude, where it's almost like a religious experience. And it's just you, and you're sitting in front of a computer, and you're like playing God, and you're putting this world together, and nothing else matters. And it's almost like you have infinite energy. But also when it's done, when you close, I'm assuming you work in Unity. Is this correct?
Yeah. I started out in CryEngine, but anyhow, this is in the weeds.
So when you close Unity, and then I'll shut up here, but when you close Unity, suddenly the exhaustion catches up. It's almost like you went through a time portal, and all of a sudden you're like, what did I just do? I just worked 6 hours.
Then you have
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then you have to go to bed and go to work, at least in my case. It was very, very powerful. It was a very special time in my life, especially when I made the decision to quit. That first year every single day was like Christmas. Like going to bed was like Christmas morning. I couldn't sleep because I was so excited about waking up and working more on it. So like I said, I knew I always wanted to make my own game, and I always assumed that nobody was just going to give me a bunch of money. I was making like white collar money pretty early, especially for how young I was, but I was living like a college kid, and I continued to live like a college kid basically until Eastshade shipped, just because both my now wife and I, Jacqueline, we were just really pinching our pennies, and I was pinching my pennies throughout my career in AAA because I knew that I wanted to have this pile of money. I actually thought I was going to take till I was like 50 or something. Like I thought I'm going to need a ton of money because I'm going to need to hire people. But then I saw people making really impressive games on their own, and I sort of got a little bit motivated, a little bit maybe jealous even, a little bit competitive. I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder that is completely unjustified, and I haven't everyone's been really nice to me in my life and supportive.
Yeah, Mr. White Collar Money over here.
Exactly, I know. And everyone's always just like believed in me and stuff, but for some reason,
I feel the same though. I'm the same way. Go ahead.
Okay, that's good to know I'm not alone.
Yeah, no, you're not.
For some reason, I've got this screw loose that's like, I'm gonna effing show them all. Like, I'm gonna show them. It's like, show who? Like, what are you talking about?
Mom and dad. It's always mom and dad.
I guess. I don't know. My mom thought I was the bee's knees since I was like.
For me, it was always like family or like a girl who turned me down in middle school. It's like, if she could only see me now. It's like, she didn't care you made a game. What's wrong with you?
Nerd. You're still a nerd.
You're still a freaking nerd. I don't care how much money you made.
So anyhow, I was saving money. When I quit my job at Sucker Punch, I think I had about $130,000 in the bank. So that's what gave me the ability to go all those years without a job. Now, my initial plan was to spend 2 years, and if I couldn't come up with a game in 2 years, I didn't want to spend my whole farm on it. I wanted to, okay, you spent your 2 years trying to make a game. You didn't make a game. Go back and get a job, Danny. Well, that didn't effing happen. Not even close. Like, by the time 2 years was up, not only had I started to rope Jacqueline in, and I think she quit her job about 3 years in, if I'm not mistaken. The feeling that I had working on Eastshade was like, if I die, just let it be after I ship Eastshade. Like, I seriously felt it was like my final mission in life. Like, it was so, I felt like when I finished it, I felt like I'm good to go.
So you had $100,000 in the bank, which sounds crazy to people. Everyone should know that once you get to $100,000, $100,000 doesn't seem, this sounds so wrong, but it doesn't seem like a lot of money once you get there.
No, not if you live in the West. Like, yeah, not if you live in the United States. Seriously. And especially now. I mean, it was more back then than it is now. We made it 4 years before we moved in with my grandma at the end.
Wow.
It wasn't like dire, like, well, we were going to be out of house and home. It wasn't like that. It was more like, hey, grandma offered, her spare bedroom. Like, that's a great way to save money. Like, we're looking pretty tight here. We would have been fine. There would have been options. So, basically we made it 4 years on probably more than $130,000 because Jacqueline quit and she added savings as well. But it was tight, especially living in the area we live, which is extremely expensive.
You wanted to make something that was safe. And I want to ask you, and you mentioned this in your video, I watched it.
I'd always known I'd wanted to make a game that was a place. A strong sense of place is my favorite thing a video game can give, and it is, and will always be, the main design pillar of any game I have authority in designing. And I knew I wanted it to be a nice place, where you could feel cozy and safe.
Why did you want to make something safe?
Both Jacqueline and I really, really like Elder Scrolls, and the thing we like about Elder Scrolls are the moments where you're not fighting and where you just feel like, the word cozy is so tired now, I actually hate even to use it. It's like, it's been hijacked. Like every single game, I guess like 5 years ago, I would have said, coziness is something that, it's an emotion that games are really great at evoking. And we just wanted to make a game dedicated to it.
Did you not feel safe when you were making this game?
I did feel scared a little bit, but no, I don't think I felt particularly safe or unsafe necessarily. Okay. We didn't have kids yet or anything. I just knew that everything was going to be okay, even if the game failed. And we also didn't assume it was going to fail just because like our wish list numbers and stuff were pointing to, okay, it's going to make some money. Like it's going to do, we had a certain minimum threshold or minimum window that we thought that the game was going to make, and that was fine for us. And we finished it together in 2019 and it shipped, and it's made about a little over 3.5 million, all platforms. And now we're working on a new title called Songs of Glimmerwick.
While that is beautiful and all, would you mind doing it elsewhere? Some of us are trying to sleep.